The two Lubbock men who want your vote for mayor take on the biggest issues of our city. From KAMC and the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal, this is the Lubbock Mayoral Debate. Sponsored by Capital Mortgage Services.
Hello and welcome to our debate between the runoff candidates vying to earn your vote and become the next mayor of Lubbock. I'm Bryan Mudd. Our candidates are now former District 4 Councilman and business owner Steve Massengale and now former District 3 Councilman, attorney and entrepreneur Mark McBrayer. Let's get right to it. Our candidates flipped a coin earlier for the opportunity to speak first for our 30-second opening statements, and Mr. Massengale will get us started.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Steve Massengale, and I'd like to thank KAMC and the AJ, Brian, Jen, and Alex for the opportunity to set the record straight and contrast myself with my opponent today. I'm a lifelong Lubbock resident who is a small business owner, graduated from Texas Tech, and I've proudly served District 4 on the City Council for the last 8 years. I'm excited to be a part of the future of Lubbock, and I know that I have the experience to lead our community and the new City Council. I'm for responsible growth, lower taxes, and taking care of the things that we already have.
All right, thank you. And an opening statement now from Mark McBrayer.
Yes, and thank you too. Mark McBrayer, I love Lubbock, I believe in Lubbock. That's why I chose to serve on the City Council, and it's also why I made the decision to step into this race for mayor. Lubbock is where I grew up. It's where my wife, Cindy, and I grew up, got married 41 years ago. It's where I've owned businesses, and it's where I'm now a practicing attorney. It's also where my daughter, who's a dentist, and my son and his wife, who are teachers, live, but most importantly, it's where my two granddaughters live. I'm in this race because I believe we need to focus on citizen safety and on keeping taxes low and on protecting our neighborhoods.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Our moderators tonight, government and public policy reporter for the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal, Alex Driggars, and host of KAMC's Good Morning Lubbock and Talking Points, Jen Phillips. The candidates have 60 seconds to answer each question. Jen, take it away.
Okay, let's get started. Thank you both gentlemen for being with us today. This question will first go to Mr. McBrayer and then to Mr. Massengale. Lubbock Council voted to raise the tax rate last year by 3.17%, which means the average Lubbock homeowner, as you know, would pay an additional $103 per year. Mr. McBrayer was the only council member to vote against this measure. Mr. Massengale was among the 6 who voted for it. If that vote happened today, would each of you vote the same way you did then? And why did you vote that way in September? Mr. McBrayer.
Yes, I would vote the same way today. And the reason I voted that way is not because I'm absolutely against ever raising taxes, but when you have a situation where your average household income does not keep up with inflation and people fall behind, that's tough times. And we have to always remember, taxes come out of the pockets of our citizens. And when they have to make tough choices, cities have to make tough choices as well. And I just believe that we're going through some tough times here in Lubbock. First year I was on the council, we voted for the no new revenue rate. I thought it was appropriate for us to do that again this year. I was the only vote, but I stand by that vote because I believe that was the best thing for the taxpayers given the conditions that we were in.
Thank you, Mr. McBrayer. Mr. Massengale, the same vote or change it?
Well, it's hard to say in a new budget because you haven't seen the tax rolls at this point. I think you always work to have a lower tax rate. What we're up against every year is making sure we can fund public safety. And that incremental adjustment in the tax rate this past year was to fund public safety. It staffed the firefighters at Fire Station 20, it bought new body cameras and some other resources. And so I think you have to take that case by case, and it's hard to pass judgment on a budget that you haven't seen. I think what's important to know about that budget vote is Mr. McBrayer's no vote voted against first responder salaries. And I just want to make sure the record's clear, as I've always voted to make sure that our first responder salaries are competitive.
Thank you, Mr. Massengale. And a rebuttal now offered to Mr. McBrayer.
Yes, and that's commonly what a lot of politicians will say is if we don't raise your taxes, we're going to have to cut public safety. That's where they always go. But there are other areas, non-essential areas. I call them non-essential. They're important. People like them, their quality of life. But that's where you go to find the cuts. You don't go to your public safety. You don't go to your first responders. So we could have looked elsewhere to find that money and still done what we needed to do for our first responders. But I really reject the idea that if we don't raise your taxes, we're going to have to always go to cutting public safety.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our next question will go first to Mr. Massengale. Last year, the Lubbock City Council voted to change an ordinance that shifted the cost burden to repair certain sewer lines in the city onto homeowners. That was in an effort to increase city work crews' efficiency, but that also wound up costing some homeowners thousands of dollars in the process. How can the City Council come to a solution on that problem that is both fair to homeowners but also addresses the responsiveness issue?
Thanks for the question. I was hoping you'd ask that question tonight or today. First of all, Mark and I voted the same on that ordinance. When it was presented to us at the time, I'm not sure we had all the information that we needed to make a good decision, but as it was implemented, we learned that it had a negative impact on homeowners. I made the move to put the ordinance back on the agenda and put it back to where it was. Councilwoman Joy and I sponsored that ordinance, and it's back to where it was, and we now have a citizens committee looking at that. I think the result we're looking for, the result I'm looking for, is something that's fair to our homeowners, also fair to our contractors, and to make sure that we're responsive, because putting the ordinance back the way it was, reversing it, does not solve the responsiveness piece.
Thank you. Mr. McBrayer, how would you address the sewer line ordinance?
Well, I was always taught that if you mess up, you fess up. And that was a mess up. And I was the first one to recognize that and say we needed to take another look at that, and that we had probably not made the best decision. And on the council, you do have to be responsive to citizens' comments. You make decisions, as Steve said, sometimes with the information you're given from City Hall, without thinking through all the consequences or not being aware of all the consequences. But when citizens come to you in mass, and believe me, it is still the most frequent issue that comes up as I'm out on the trail, then you have to be willing to say, maybe we made the wrong decision, maybe we need to take another look at it. And I, again, am glad and voted for us going back to the way that it was, and that will relieve that burden. We'll also have an opportunity in there for people who do want to choose their own private plumbing service to take care of the problem. If that's quicker for them and they can bear the expense, they can choose that option as well.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And a rebuttal from Mr. Massengale.
Thank you very much. I just want to clear up some misinformation on this, is that Mr. McBrayer was not part of the solution when we put the ordinance back on the agenda. He has said that he wanted to look at it, but when we went and talked to city staff, there had been no movement. And so I just want to be clear that I'm the one that put the ordinance back on the agenda to reverse the ordinance, to relieve the homeowners of the issue, to start the process to find the final resolution.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll start with Mr. McBrayer. Last year, our annual crime report noted a decrease in several categories of crime, but there was an increase in robberies. I'm talking about the year of 2022 to 2023. In just the first quarter of this year, 2024, we saw 7 homicides as compared to the first quarter of 2023 with 4. Do you believe our current public safety policies are keeping us safe? And how do we change that if you don't?
I think it's obvious to most of the citizens of Lubbock that Lubbock has a crime problem. Most of it is gang and drug related violence. We did show a decrease in many areas between 22 and 23, but we've not got all the statistics yet in on 2024, and I think it's apparent that some of those categories are going to go up this year. It's no surprise that almost every other night you hear of a shooting. There's murders. Our murder rate is much higher. We've got a new police chief now, and that's one of the keys to solving this problem. I think we've chosen a police chief with a good experience in bringing that particular, working on that particular area of crime that's gang and drug related. But I also believe that we have to support our police officers. They are the real source of getting control of our crime problem. And we have a problem with keeping our police officers here, of paying them enough that after we train them, they don't leave and go elsewhere. We need to get control of that situation, and that is really the most important key to getting the crime rate down in Lubbock, and I'm focused on that, and I'm happy to have the Lubbock Professional Police Association's endorsement.
Thank you. Mr. Massengale, do you believe that our policies keep us safe right now?
Thank you. I think it's important that you have a mayor and a city council that understands how to fight crime. I think we've started that process. I think the most important thing for your viewers to know is the first step was defeating Prop A. I think, and that was help with the fight with gangs and drugs. Second point is that we were looking for the right police chief. We were fortunate that we've hired a superstar in the law enforcement arena with Chief Herman. We expect him to come in and hold criminals accountable, and we expect him to come in and lead our officers in a way that improves morale so that they can protect our citizens when they need them most. And lastly, I would just say I'll do what I've always done. As I said before, I'll support making sure that our first responders have competitive pay, something that my opponent cannot say.
All right, quickly though, before we move on, since you were referenced, Mr. McBrayer, are you in a 30-second rebuttal there on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what he means by I don't support competitive pay for our police officers. I definitely do. They understand that I do. That's why they've endorsed me. And that's one of the areas in which I've said you don't touch that. You address that first when you have a budget. That's why I believe I can also stand for low taxes, but also taking care of our first responders and our police in particular. Since we have a crime problem, that is really what we have to get a handle on. Lubbock is a great place to live, but we don't want it to go into decline, and crime is one of the fastest ways to see that happen. So we will address that. We've addressed it with a new chief. We will address it with our police officers and making sure they're paid, and we have a fully staffed force of police officers.
All right, and gentlemen, we also took questions from folks in town, and Alice Lozada has a question now for Mr. McBrayer first about neglected areas and affordable housing in Lubbock.
My question is actually a two-part question. Given the impact of blight on urban communities, what strategies would you implement to address abandoned properties, vacant lots, and neglected areas? And then, what plans do you have to increase affordable housing options in blighted neighborhoods?
My district that I served on the city council was District 3. It's one of the older districts in Lubbock, and we can't afford to neglect our older neighborhoods. A lot of people live in them. They want their quality of life to be at the same level that other people, other parts of the city enjoy. But we do have a problem in some areas of town where we don't have development, we don't have housing. The city can make it possible for developers to come in and develop in those areas, but you have to have a willingness on their part to go in and take that risk. So the city's best position there is to identify those areas, to work with developers, to let them know where they can go and how they can find the resources. But most importantly, is to make sure that the permitting process and everything that they have to go through and the regulations are cleared out and can move quickly, so developments in these areas of town can move forward without a lot of delay. There's only so much a city can do without private people and companies putting the money into it, but it's our job to make it easy for them to do so.
All right, Mr. Massengale, we've seen a lot of city growth. What about neighborhood refurbishment here?
Well, I want to thank Alice for the question. I think you start with code enforcement. I've been involved in several situations to remove substandard housing all over our community. And I think it's important that the city council continues to resource codes to make sure they live up to the council's expectation. I supported infrastructure investment with ARPA funds in District 2 to help with development in those areas. I think we have to continue to find opportunities for the city to invest in infrastructure to accelerate development of homes in those types of areas. The city can't build the houses, the city can't get in the housing business, but I think there's opportunities like I've already experienced to continue to help with some of those areas that have development issues.
All right, we'll give the candidates a moment to catch their breath. Coming up, we've got questions on the topics of student housing developments, city pools, and more. You're watching the 2024 Lubbock Mayoral Debate on KAMC.
From KAMC and the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal, this is the Lubbock Mayoral Debate, sponsored by Capital Mortgage Services.
Welcome back. We're also streaming on everythinglubbock.com and LubbockOnline.com, where we'll also post some web exclusive questions and answers for the candidates when we're done here. For now, Alex has our next question.
Thank you, Brian. Mr. Massengale, the City Council recently blocked 2 proposals for student housing developments in central Lubbock near Texas Tech that wound up being rather controversial. With this project, which is coming on the City Council agenda very soon, and future projects, how will you balance the need for growth and progress while protecting neighborhoods, especially in Lubbock's older parts of the city?
I think it's vital that you protect neighborhoods, but at the same time, you've got to respect growth. I'm a pro-growth candidate. My opponent is anti-growth. These projects are vital to our tax base, and we've got to find ways as these zone cases come up to balance the needs and the compatibility with neighborhoods and allow these developments to be built. The 2 developments are not exactly the same. One's in a much more blighted part of the city, and I think it's easier to look at that one and see that it's improvement, and those are coming back in front of the City Council.
And Mr. McBrayer, how do you balance quality of life with growth and progress?
Well, first of all, let me just address the fact that he says I'm an anti-growth candidate. I'm not an anti-growth candidate. Lubbock is going to grow. It's grown ever since I've been here. I remember in 1960, the population was 128,691. I've never forgotten that. We're now 150,000 people, beyond that number here in town. Lubbock is going to grow because it's an inviting place for families to come, for businesses to come, and we have a fantastic, amazing university here. I'm pro-growth, I'm pro-Texas Tech. But people live in neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are important. These people who make Lubbock their home have their concerns and their interests that have to be protected and have to be balanced against the needs of students who are here for 4 years to go to Tech. So we can't have a development that disrupts a neighborhood, an established neighborhood. So the balance, and you use the right word, balance, between the need for growth and development and protecting existing neighborhoods. I don't know that either of those neighborhoods would say that they are blighted, but my decision was to try to protect them.
Thank you.
Next question, do you believe transparency to your community and to the local media are important in local government in particular? And what are some measures you can take to ensure transparency across all city offices that includes your police and your fire departments as mayor? And we'll start with Mr. McBrayer.
Well, transparency is absolutely important, and it is one of the things you do hear oftentimes from citizens, that communication is a key to transparency, and oftentimes citizens will say, especially when they come before the council, as they have many times, we didn't know about this. Now, we can sit there and say to them all we want, well, we posted it here, we posted it there, but when that happens, we have to understand that we have not really done a good job of getting the message out. So people need to understand what decisions we are making, what we are voting on, because we answer to the citizens of Lubbock. And all government exists at the consent of the governed. And so we need to make sure that they understand what we're doing, what we are voting on, especially something that affects them very significantly, like many of the decisions we've made. We can do a much better job of communication, and I will attempt to address that situation when I am mayor.
Mr. Massengale, transparency, community and local media.
Transparency is one of the most important things local government can do. I say there's one thing that the city of Lubbock can always improve on, and that's communication. As mayor, I am prepared to have town hall meetings and make sure that we communicate in different ways so that citizens know what goes on, whether that's with first responders or a sewer ordinance. I think it's incumbent upon the mayor to make sure that they pick up on those things and advise the council and advise the staff, just to make sure that we over communicate, because I don't believe that the city of Lubbock and what they do to be transparent communicates enough.
All right, gentlemen, it's time for another question from the folks around town. Morgan Kirkpatrick has a question now for you, Steve Massengale, first, for what to do in the summer and our sudden lack of public pools.
I would love to know, and I know a lot of other people would love to know, whether or not each candidate has a plan to bring pools back to Lubbock. It is really sad to know that there are very few pools available, and those are fairly expensive and so not accessible to all citizens of Lubbock.
Yeah.
I think pools are important. I think we're in a situation where the pools have outlived their useful life. I heard Mr. McBrayer say that in the general fund, he's identified essential and non-essential. Maybe pools are non-essential to him, but what I hear is that our citizens say pools are important. As mayor, I'm prepared to have a discussion with the community and with our council to find a solution moving forward so that our citizens have. People have talked about an aquatic center. That's going to cost money, but I think it's something, this is not a council decision. This is a council plus community decision, but we've got to find a solution for pools for Lubbock moving forward.
Mr. McBrayer, are the splash pads that have been put in enough?
Well, splash pads will address a particular community, and parents with young kids, they can enjoy that, but the concern is where do teenagers go for the summer? Our different pools in Lubbock had different issues, different problems they faced. They also had different use. Some were heavily used, some were not used very much at all. So it does always come down to what's the most effective use of your taxpayers' money and where do you put that? And is it towards something that a lot of people use or very few people use? And the problem with pools were they're very expensive, but they're only open for a few months during the summer. I think we really need to investigate other kinds of quality of life issues that make available opportunities for people, including teenagers, all year round, and not just something that is used for just a few months. We are going to keep one of our pools open, so there will be that resource, and we've also had programs by which we could bus kids to those schools during the summer, so they have that opportunity to do that, and we will keep doing that, I'm sure, in the future.
Very good. Alex, you got the next question for us.
Thanks. In March, the City Council advanced plans to build a solid waste transfer station in southwest Lubbock. That was applauded as good for the whole city, but there were some constituents, some neighbors that weren't a big fan of that. When what your constituents are saying conflicts with what your gut or your conscience is saying, how do you work through that? Which one of those things do you go with? Mr. McBrayer, we'll go to you first.
Well, as I said earlier, you always govern with the consent of the governed. So you always have to listen when you think you've made a right decision, but your public comes and tells you, no, that wasn't the right decision. That's always a tough position to be in, but you have to listen to people. And one of the things I think is very important on our city council is that we're prepared to listen to people and that we don't act like they don't know what's important to them or don't know what they're talking about, because they do. When they come to you and show up, hundreds of them in your city council, they know what they're talking about. They know what's important to them. So we made a decision about that trash station. We thought was a good decision based on the information given to us. But then when we heard, and this wasn't in my district, and I wasn't really familiar with the area it was in. So when these people came forward, I went out there and I drove those roads, and I thought, no, there's no way these roads can handle the kind of traffic that we're going to be putting on them. They're very dangerous. So my position was, let's hit the pause button and let's make sure that we have absolutely made the best decision and the best location, because we were brought one location. So I'm proud of the decision that I made.
And Mr. Massengale, how do you balance your conscience with your constituents?
First of all, the waste transfer station was a financial decision. It was a financial decision that has a positive impact on the solid waste fund and how we deliver services to citizens. I've been consistent on the solid waste transfer station. I think it's the right move. How do you balance that? You make sure you communicate. You sit down and listen to citizens and understand their concerns. Some of that is legitimate. Some of that is made up on social media. But I think it's incumbent on the city of Lubbock. They have to get this one right. It's got to be safe. It's got to be clean. And Mark brought up the roads, but the roads are addressed in the street bond and in the final plan from the city of Lubbock. So I feel good about the streets.
All right. Gentlemen, that's all the questions we have time for now. We're going to get you a quick 30-second closing statement, beginning with Mark McBrayer.
It's my pleasure to run for mayor of Lubbock. It's a real responsibility. That's why I have chosen to retire from the practice of law so that I can give it a my full-time attention. And it is a full-time job if you really want to do the job right. Lubbock deserves a mayor who listens to people, who understands that he represents them and not City Hall, and he is accountable to them. I believe Lubbock citizens and voters have shown me and told me that they're ready for a change. They're not prepared to go back to the Pope and Massengale years and the way of doing things, of raising their taxes and spending more government money and more of their tax money on big government projects. So I'm the change candidate. I'm offering a change to the citizens of Lubbock, and I would appreciate your vote in the runoff election in June. If so, I believe we can begin to take Lubbock in a new direction.
All right, Mr. Massengale, your 30-second closing statement.
Thank you. I'd be honored to be your mayor. I pledge to make our city a better place to live, raise our children, run businesses, and retire. How do you do that? You do it with responsible growth, as I mentioned before, which helps us bring lower taxes. And we work to continue to make our city safe, retaining our public servants, both fire and police. And then we take care of what we have, like the pools, and we lead to build, and we change what we need. I promise to do this and more as your mayor. I'm Steve Massengale, and I'd be honored to have your vote in the June runoff.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. And that wraps up our televised mayoral debate on KAMC. But look for more Q&A with the candidates online at everythinglubbock.com and lubbockonline.com. Early voting in the runoff election begins Monday, June 3rd, and Election Day is Saturday, June 15th. And we thank you for watching.